Welcome everybody back to Dr. Sellars Educate. We are continuing to explore what topics we want to study and what topics do we not want to study to achieve a passing score on the CNE exam. For some of you, you're returning because you want to be a better nurse educator. We're glad that you're here as well. This series that we're exploring really does help us stay focused on the journey to CNE while we're also becoming a better nurse educator. Scholarship is a core responsibility as a nurse educator. We work with our students to support their scholarly work, especially at the graduate level. We also role model these evidence based practices that we're going to be talking about today to help ensure that we are demonstrating the scholarly framework that we want to make sure our students are able to emulate. And in the future, we want them to also engage in scholarly inquiry as part of their work as a nurse educator or nurse. We know that we are not just teaching future nurses, we're also teaching future nurse educators. And all of us are nurse educators when you think about it. It's not about a title, it's really about a responsibility. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. We are delighted that you're here. In every single snapshot, we want you to do two things. Okay, so first of all, we want you to pull out Billings and Halstead Teaching and Nursing. This is the 6th edition. And we also want you to pull out your study worksheet. It's right here in the description. This is going to help you stay focused as we talk through this very important topic today. On the study worksheet, you want to go ahead and write down today's date, whatever date you're watching the snapshot. And then we're going to talk about how do you stay focused on your journey towards CNE, or for your CNE renewal, we are going to add some content related to Competency 7, which is scholarship based on the NLN Nurse Educator competencies. And we also want to make sure we are supporting you all as you move forward on your journey to renew your CNE. I'm on that journey right now, and I want to take you along and help you make sure that you meet the minimum requirements for your renewal process. So, as we look at content in this snapshot, we're going to be pulling from two resources. Okay, so first of all, page 8 through 10 in Billings and Halstead. This is the 6th edition. I know some of you may have the 7th edition, but because NLN has aligned the exam to the 6th edition, we're staying with the 6th edition. Okay, and then the second resource is Dr. Caputi's CNE review book. So if you have the 2nd edition, that is chapter 7, starting on page 127. The benefit of Dr. Caputi's review book is that it is similar to a Cliff Notes version. It's going to give you a really good overview. There are some excellent practice questions at the end of the chapter to really stimulate your thinking as it relates to scholarship. And that's going to start on page 138. Well, actually, it's 137. So 137 is where you're going to see a summary, and then going into 138 is going to be the practice test questions. And 137 is going to be those practice test questions in Dr. Caputi's CNE review book related to scholarship. And then the last resource, which I know some of you already have, is going to be your study workbook. Okay, so you can now order it on Amazon, and we are going to be on page 65. And this is going to reiterate the resources that we've talked about. Now, the benefit of a workbook is to also keep you focused, but how many of us are more likely to remember information when we physically write it down? That's right. Putting pen to paper is going to help us remember. So either using your study workbook or your study worksheet is going to help you stay focused. All right, so what is it that we're going to be talking about? Boyer Scholarship Model. You're going to think about really two focal areas that we're going to concentrate on: Boyer Scholarship Model and research models. Do you think these are areas that you need to study? Yes or no? So you can go ahead and write that down right now on your study worksheet. Think about whether or not these are areas that you may need to focus on based on that detailed test blueprint that is included in your candidate handbook. Okay, so we focus primarily when we're talking through content, we focus primarily on C&E, but this content is relevant for all three of the C&E exams. So that's C&E, that academic nurse educator certification, as well as the C&E novice and the C&E clinical as well. Competency 7, application is key. Okay, so we want to reinforce that really important principle. We know that 70 to 80% of the content on the CNE exams are going to be at that application and analysis level. Just this week, we heard from a colleague that she saw so many questions about the clinical setting, and she's a course lead and teaches didactic as her primary role. So it's been a long time since she's been in the clinical setting. Well, this is what we know about the CNE exam. First of all, we are responsible for ensuring that we understand, and not only understand from an application standpoint, but also an analysis standpoint. What is the responsibility that we have to ensure there is alignment with the clinical learning objectives, with the clinical experiences, and those simulation and skills lab experiences? Okay, so yes, you could see several questions as it relates to the clinical setting, but it is directly aligned with the learning objectives and the program outcomes for the academic program overall. All right, so that's why application is key. So, two things. You want to understand, first of all, what is the definition of Boyer's dimensions of scholarship that we're going to talk through to give you a good introduction. And then, second of all, what are some specific examples? So, if you guessed yes, you need to be knowledgeable about Boyer's dimensions of scholarship, you are absolutely right. Spirit of inquiry, we're going to talk deeper about that. And then, what are your gaps? Taking a look at that blueprint for the CNE exam that you will be taking, you want to identify where are you today related to each of those behavioral statements. Your success on the CNE exam is tied to your ability to integrate these teaching strategies into your everyday work. When you get to the exam, you want it to be very familiar questions that you are seeing, because not only have you spent time studying the content, but you've also integrated these evidence-based practices that we explore during our snapshots, during our monthly boot camp, and during our masterclass sessions every single month. Okay, so what are your gaps? That's what you want to do. A real honest self-assessment of where you are today. And we know you're not going to stay there. All right, so here we go. We are taking a look at our thought-provoking question that you can see here. So first of all, thinking through this question: a nurse educator has accepted an appointment to the ANCC Commission on Accreditation. Which scholarship role is this nurse educator fulfilling? So you have the A, application, B, integration, or C, discovery. Okay, so while you're thinking about which specific dimension of Boyer scholarship model it aligns with this statement and this responsibility, I want to also connect with those of you that are on that journey to renewing your CNE. Now, here's the great news. We will be announcing a renewal workshop, just like we did last year, that we will launch this year. Not only because we have firsthand experience, a few of us that are content experts here at Dr. Sellars Educate have recently gone through the renewal process. So we want to share with you what our journey was like, and also give you some tips to ensure that your renewal certification application will be approved and there'll be no issues, right? We don't want any issues as it relates to meeting those minimum requirements of demonstrating behaviors and completing workshops related to at least 5 out of the 8 competencies for CNE. If you're on your journey for CNE clinical or CNE novice, well, CNE clinical would be the only one, then we can help you with that too. We'll be announcing that workshop date within the next 30 days. And then for CNE novice, there is no renewal process, because the expectation is at the end of your certification, which is 3 years, you will then sit for the CNE. If you have questions about that, if you think that you're more aligned with the CNE clinical, reach out to NLN, and they will be the best person that can answer your question related to what do you do when your CNE novice expires, and specifically, what are your options? All right, so let's get back to what is listed here under renewal alignment. So I want to bring to your attention, this is again competency 7. There are task statements, and hopefully they look familiar because they are the exact same ones that are listed in the actual blueprint. So these task statements that are related to competency 7, we are required to show evidence through relevant activities that align with those task statements. So as an example, you can see the first one says attend continuing education seminars, workshops, conferences, or other educational programs that enhance one's ability to engage in scholarly activities. Each workshop or seminar needs to be identified and listed separately. Each activity can then be applied to the appropriate competency. And you can see renewal credits, that's what RCs stand for. One contact hour or continuing education contact hour is equivalent to one renewal credit. Okay. So what you want to do is when you go to the NLN website, you will see the actual certification portal link. And you will also see on that left hand side the three different types of certifications. The best step to take is to click on, as an example, C&E, and then you will open up to a new page. On that left hand side, if you scroll down, you will see C&E renewal, and there are lots of resources that can help you move forward on your journey. Those are the exact resources that we use when we do our workshop. We only use NLN recommended references and resources because we want to make sure we're aligning with the expectations that they have. All right, so now we're going to go back to our content as we dig deeper into what is it that you need to focus on and what is it that you don't need to focus on when you are moving forward on your journey. So application is key. We've talked about that, spirit of inquiry, and what your gaps are. You're going to do a self-assessment using that blueprint to make sure that you are closing your knowledge gaps. All right, so if you guess yes for Boyer's dimension of scholarship, you're absolutely right. So give yourself a round of applause. This is what you need to know. First, you're going to use these three resources that we've talked about, starting with Billings and Halstead Teaching and Nursing. So this textbook, 6th edition is this one. But if you have 7th edition, you're going to look at chapter 1, okay? Pages 8 through 10 are going to give you a really good understanding of Boyer's dimension of scholarship. There are 4 different dimensions. We like to talk about them from a scaffolding standpoint, okay? Starting with discovery, that's that lowest level. That's our foundation. That's where we start, right? That's new research. And then we build on that. So we're able to pull in the evidence from the literature and we can apply it based on information that we pull from the literature. We can integrate that into our everyday practices. So if you guessed integration was that next level, you're absolutely right. We're able to do a literature search, systematic reviews, where we're solidifying what our practices are and aligning them with what the evidence says they should be. And then that next level is going to be application. And then the highest level, that highest form of scholarship is teaching. Okay, so what you want to do is take a look in your study workbook, page 65. If you're curious, or if some of that sounded like alphabet soup, that's okay. So page 65 in your study workbook, and on page 8 and 9 in the sixth edition for Billings and Halstead, and then page 10 gives you a really good summary. So let's take a look at one example, which brings us to our next point. So when you look at scholarship of integration on page 8, it gives you a really good introduction. And then I want you to take a look at those last 2 sentences. Okay, it says the scholarship of integration involves designing learning models that guide students to apply their previously learned knowledge. What does that sound like to clinical situations? If you're thinking Kolb's experiential learning theory, you're absolutely right. Okay, such as with the use of high amplitude patient simulation. Much scholarship of integration is being published in the area of patient simulation at this time. Now, the reason why I wanted to point out content specifically from Billings and Halstead is because these are examples of scholarship of integration. I mentioned some of them as well when I was sharing with you kind of that scaffolding approach you want to think about. And that's what you need to ensure that you're closing the loop about. Okay, so the first step is what is the definition of each of these dimensions of scholarship? And then the second point, what are specific examples? That's what our study workbook on page 65 is going to give you to ensure that you are closing your knowledge gaps. All right, now next, what we want to talk about is going to be research models. So think about it. Yes or no? Do you think these are areas that you want to focus on as you're moving forward on your journey? So we have qualitative and quantitative models. And then we have mixed methods model. Do you think this is an area you should focus on? Yes or no? All right, so let's take a look. If you chose no, you are correct. Okay, this is not an area that you will need to focus on, but this is what you will need to focus on. Let's talk a little bit about this spirit of inquiry that I know many of us heard about in graduate school, and we continue to talk about it from an academic standpoint. So, what does it really mean? Well, it simply means us motivating our students and being a role model to explore the literature. Let's talk about grants that we're involved in, or publications that we are writing, let's partner with our students when possible to expose them to this wonderful experience of creating this scholarship inquiry, this spirit of inquiry, and then citing references when we're having discussions with our students, whether that's online or in person. Let's make sure we include that citation so students can then explore that specific piece of evidence to hopefully get a better understanding of content, or maybe they use it in the future. Perhaps they are doing a presentation themselves and they use a literature article that we have cited as well. It gives students a deeper understanding and more context related to that subject matter. I just had this happen with a student that I had an online discussion with, and they were able to go to the literature themselves, read those articles, and then come back and share in their discussion posts their own perspective, aligning it with their everyday work. So it's a great way to role model these evidence-based practices that we want to plant the seeds for our students to engage in this lifelong commitment to education and really improving our skills in nursing and ultimately as a nurse educator. We are all nurse educators. We just want our students to be able to take some of these strategies that we're using in the classroom with them once they graduate. So we're role modeling, we're integrating evidence-based articles in addition to our textbooks. We know that once textbooks are published, they're already outdated, right? So we have a great opportunity to pull from the literature and ask students to do the same. I'll tell you one example before we wrap up and take a look at our answer to our thought-provoking question. But one of the teaching strategies that I love doing, especially when I'm teaching in person, are learning circles. This is an opportunity for students to go to the literature and pull articles for themselves. And then we want to ask students to bring them into the classroom and them to engage in peer learning through small circles. So 3 to 4 students can be grouped together and they can share their perspective about this specific article. Now, a couple of things you want to make sure you keep in mind. First of all, when we assign a pre-classroom assignment, such as the one that I just explained with learning circles, we are engaging in a flipped classroom model. This allows learning to start happening even before students cross into our classroom. So we can ask them as a ticket to class even to locate an article that is aligned with the specific learning objective that we're focusing on during that classroom experience or during that online experience. You can certainly do learning circles as well remotely, just takes a little bit more planning and very clear directions. Okay, so first of all, make sure there's alignment between that literature article review that students are doing and the article they're bringing in. And then, second of all, we also want to actively participate in this learning process that we're having with students. Engaging in learning circles is a great way for students to take some responsibility and really take that leadership role of being responsible for their learning. We're truly partnering with students on this learning journey. All right, so we're going to go ahead and close out now and take a look at our thought-provoking question. So let's go back there. So if you chose A, application, you are correct. Okay, so this is an example of application. If it's a muddy point for you, this is what I want you to do. First of all, don't get discouraged, okay? It can be very confusing for many colleagues, but what I want you to do is take a look on page 9 in Billings and Halstead. This is where you're going to see a really good overview of the scholarship of application. And then in your study workbook, you're also going to see a section regarding application of scholarship. We hope that this snapshot has been helpful for you. Remember to tune in every single week. We broadcast a new snapshot that is going to align with the NLN Nurse Educator competencies to help you close your knowledge gaps, number one, so that you can achieve success on the CNE exam. But second of all, it's going to help you become a better nurse educator. Thank you for joining, and we'll see you in the next snapshot.